T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Bridge to the Future. This is our second episode, and our guest today is Lou Zacharilla. He is Director of Innovation and Development for Space and Satellite Professionals International, and he is co-founder of the Intelligent Community Forum. Lou, welcome to A Bridge to the Future.
Thanks, Frank. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you, and I would like to start with how you got where you are today. What caused you to get so deeply involved in the space industry, and then why did you specifically choose satellites as your focus?
There was a certain point I had my own company. Robert Bell and I had actually started a company, and we both like certain things about technology and communications and so forth. Long story short, we started to work in the marketing area for some companies in the sector, which at that time was, still emerging. We just had the open skies policy. Pan Am-Sat and all of those companies were just coming into their own, and there was an opportunity to manage a trade association called World Teleport Association, which was located in the World Trade Center at the time. It was part of the World Trade Center's organization. And they asked us if we wanted to manage it on an outsourced basis with my company. And so we looked at the opportunity. We said, "Hey, this is a pretty neat industry, because teleports, right? I mean, these are basically the new kind of port, the new seaport, the new rail port. Now we've got teleports." So there was a project out in Staten Island, which was basically an economic development project tied to communications, tied to these satellite things. So we said, yeah, let's take over the association. And managing associations is great because I love communities. I love building community. I think communities are really powerful. And so we did it, and we were successful. They were very happy with what we did. So in another organization at the time, Frank, the SSPI, Space and Satellite Professionals International, came to us and said, "Look, we're not doing so well here. Would you guys be interested in managing us?" And I actually held out for a while there, but we eventually said, "Oh yeah, okay, we'll do it," because we knew again that the industry was just one that was about to take off, and so we ended up managing both of them, and we still do to this day.
Okay.
And it's just given us access to all kinds of stories and information. And now we manage the teleports, which are the ground segment, and the space and satellite industry, which is the sky. So we control the earth and the sky. I mean, you can't beat that for a living, right?
That's pretty good. So that means you didn't start out as a space person back in the 70s and 80s like some of us did. You came into it from a different perspective.
Yeah. I always loved the industry, but I was an advertising copywriter.
Okay.
I was writing copy for the U.S. Army and AT&T and Sperry and those companies.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Space and Satellite Professionals International. What is the mission? What is the purpose? And what does the association attempt to do?
Well, SSPI is the largest nonprofit trade association for industry professionals globally. We've got 16 chapters around the world, about 3,000 now individual members. Essentially, we promote the interests of professionals whose businesses or lives touch our industry. And our mandate is really to promote the growth of the industry, to be the tip of the spear, to let people know that satellites can do a lot of things for them that they might not even imagine it can do, both from a business perspective, but also from a social perspective. So one of the things we did, Frank, is develop the Better Satellite World campaign, which, as an old advertising guy, I looked at the narrative in the industry at the time, and it was really engineers talking to engineers, and it was like it was like they're like the old Catholic Church in the 14th century. It was like they were speaking Latin and nobody knew what they were talking about. But
Yeah.
satellites were doing all kinds of great things. Bill Gates will tell you that he wasn't able to remediate polio in India without a satellite. We're monitoring water supplies and nuclear compliance treaties. And so what we decided to do was to collect as many great stories as we can about how satellites are transforming the human experience and share that narrative. And that's kind of what we continue to do today. It was a very successful campaign, the Better Satellite World campaign. And that led to the other part of our mission, which is to nurture talent, to try to get people as excited as you've done with your books about the industry and to get them into it. So that's really important for us as well. And again, it's a community, right? From the CEO level all the way down. And we're just a big network of people doing business with one another and inspiring one another.
As you know, I talk about the technological overview effect, which is really centered around satellites, in the sense that the astronauts see the unity of the Earth, organic unity, if you will, and satellites really create a social unity. So I've always found it remarkable that with the internet and with satellite communications, I can talk to the person in the office next door, or I can talk to somebody in Australia.
Right.
And there's this kind of collapsing of space and time that the satellite brings to our culture. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah,
and not noticed enough.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing as profound as the overview effect, I guess, but we are, as you say, able to use satellites to do the kinds of things that bring levels of prosperity and understanding across the world. And so again, that's one of the things that motivates us here at SSPI.
Yeah, and then you are also co-founder of another organization focused on communities. And could you tell us about how those two interests go together?
Yeah, sure. It's called the Intelligent Community Forum. And back in the 80s, actually, when we were managing, as I mentioned, the World Teleport Association, which was started by the World Trade Centers organization. It was really designed to look at economic development and the role of communications in it. We got very excited about the possibility of connectivity, broadband connectivity, which at that time could only be delivered by a satellite, influencing parts of the world that may not be experiencing the types of prosperity that the big cities were and so forth. We saw that three satellites in geosynchronous orbit could connect the entire Earth with a broadband footprint, right? And so we began to look at this issue and to see if we could improve the economies of cities. And we really tried to look at it from the perspective of a think tank, which was what is the outcome here of connectivity? When you connect a place, does GDP move, right? Mm-hmm. And so we managed to get the Teleport Association to underwrite this work that we did. And long story short, today we've got 200 cities that follow this method, and we've written a couple of books, and we understand, as does everyone now, that connectivity, broadband connectivity in particular, the internet, is kind of like the new railroad. Yeah. If you're not connected to it, you're not going to be able to put your cargo on it and trade with other parts of the world and do the types of things that we kind of take for granted today. And so what we've been working on is looking at ways of improving the lives of people in cities, beginning with the railroad, with broadband, making sure that they understand that broadband, irrespective of how they get it, is where you start. So that's sort of the smart city thing. But then you can move to intelligent communities, which is sort of the area you and I talk about a lot, and you think about, which is if we can unlock human intelligence, we can sort through a lot of the world's problems.
Indeed, we can. And I think we're probably making more progress than we notice
Mm,
because the news media focuses on tragedy, and there are tragedies, just like the mass shootings that we've been witnessing recently. But at the same time, it's remarkable how humanity can do terrible things and wonderful things in the same day.
right.
And that's just the nature of humanity. What about your members who are part of the association? Let's talk about what are they excited about and what are they worried about?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of our members are businesses, and they are excited about the possibilities now of the new constellations that are up there, that are able to provide different levels of connectivity, different types of services, parsing data, distributing to the world. There are Frank, we're a $1.3 trillion industry now, depending on whose numbers you read, and we're finding that the entrepreneurial class that's in our industry now is excited about the social mission as much as the business mission. They're finding that Earth observation satellites, for example, companies like Asteria in Israel, I was speaking with their CEO yesterday, can now monitor through L-band, through satellite, the degree of potable water
Uh-huh.
underground. And they've got a product out into the market, and they're saving hundreds of millions of dollars worth of water in places that don't have a lot of water. They're helping to reduce pollution. They're monitoring for things like lithium. And so we're seeing like dozens and dozens of new business models coming online that have all of these applications that, again, were unthinkable 20 years ago. What are they worried about? What everybody else worries about: the climate,
Yeah.
space, getting too crowded, some of the social issues in our cities and places like that. But what's interesting about our business, Frank, as you know, is that these people think they can solve the problem.
Yeah.
We think, there a lot of these guys come out of, and women come out of NASA and these
Yeah.
organizations, and they just apply themselves to solving problems.
Well, I've thought about this a lot. It seems to me that when people say they're opposed to space exploration, they don't mean astronomy, which is a form of space exploration. I don't think most of them are opposed to satellites. I think the concern is humans leaving planet Earth. And there's two things there that worry people. One is leaving the Earth, abandoning the Earth, and the other is bringing our bad behavior into the solar ecosystem. But satellites seem to really get a pass, except for one thing, which is orbital debris. And I'd like to get your thoughts on what you think we're going to be able to do about orbital debris, because that is one issue. And then I guess while I'm throwing things at you, I would also talk about constellations and light pollution and how the satellite community feels about those two issues.
Yeah. If I could, Frank, I'm going to sort of address the first part of the question, because satellites are neutral. I mean, right? They're machines, and they go up there and they provide a function, right? A certain
Yeah.
communication and data gathering and distribution function, and they're brilliant for point to multi-point distribution. And there's no other technology ever invented, or probably ever will be invented, that can do that type of thing. It's the reason people can sit home and watch Netflix or The Sopranos in the old days, right? Because that satellite signal would deliver it to their cable head end all around the country, and it was very efficient, and it continues to do that kind of thing. Human beings are going to continue to do what they've been doing for the last 50,000 years, unless, again, as you and I talk about all the time, unless the focus goes inward and not outward first. And yeah, I think there's an obligation for people to look at their history, to look at themselves and say, what do we want as we continue to pursue the destiny of our species? With regard to debris, I mean, yeah, we've got thousands of satellites up there now, and it is a problem. It's a dangerous issue, and I mean, if you start looking at what a piece of debris as big as a baseball can do, it's pretty serious stuff. And I was asking Dave Meltzer, who runs the Global VSAT Forum. He happens to be a lawyer, where we are with regard to this issue, and he said, we need compliance treaties. And right now there's no single global body responsible for developing and policing global compliance. Although I suspect one's going to emerge in the years ahead. Satellite operators cooperate to avoid collisions as it's enlightened self-interest, right? And so far that's worked. So far, especially with the geostationary, the big satellites. We had one a few years ago called Zombie Sat. This satellite just went into zombie orbit, and the two satellite companies, the engineers just moved this thing so that it didn't cause any damage. So there are talks in the higher bodies, the UN and places, about orbital debris issues. And as with any political bodies, it's probably going to take a long time to see what's in everybody's national interest, but it's in every human being's interest to deal with a situation. But I have to say, with the geostationary satellites, the other day, Eutelsat successfully decommissioned one of its satellites, Eutelsat 5, I think it was. And, after 20 years, it just moved it to an orbit that was not in anybody's way, 400 kilometers above its current orbit. We can do that with the bigger satellites. It's the little stuff that's going to be the problem, and there's going to be more of it out there.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I wanted to go back to your other point about Earth observation. One of the ideas that I thought about a lot in writing the overview effect was the notion of planetary management, which goes back to the example you were talking about, the Israeli company. That is to say, we now have an overview technologically of the whole planet, and we have an incredible amount of data coming down from the satellites. And it seems to me it gives us an opportunity to begin managing and using resources really effectively. But are we at a point where we have so much data that now the challenge is to manage the data and make sense out of it? Is that a role for artificial intelligence, or how do we maximize all this information?
Well, there is obviously there's a lot of data, right? But again, we're getting pretty good at parsing it and using it, for specific applications in certain things. AI is going to be a big piece of this, and satellites are going to be data storage houses for a lot of this stuff. And I was just speaking with isotropic networks. They do a terrific job of creating these complex networks that put data out, as appropriate, as needed. So we're beginning to sort of refine it and get it to places as needed, cost efficiently, and so forth. So again, the machines will get better, will get more efficient. If we can continue to confine it to managing resources, to managing our cities, of course, they're going to manage autonomous vehicles. Within 20 years, 70% of the vehicles on the road are going to be autonomous vehicles.
Right.
Right. And satellite will be doing the backhaul for all of that control. You'll have drones, doing the weather reports and probably monitoring your lawnmower as it cuts your grass. That stuff's all going to take place. The concern is always the one that I think everybody rightly understands, which is what happens to us in terms of privacy, what happens to our political systems, our regulatory systems, when all of this transformation comes down at us in society, because we're actually choosing the society we want. We want it to be more convenient. We want these things because a lot of them serve the greater good. But my concern, Frank, is the one you and I again talk about a lot: is what is going to happen to us? Are we going to improve our behavior in societies? Is it going to make us less lonely? I mean, we talked about the shootings, the mass shootings. So much of this is predicated on just loneliness and people not feeling empowered. And I don't think satellites are the cause of that. I don't think social media even is necessarily the primary cause of it. But we're going to have to look at these things. And, it's not going to be necessarily technology that pulls us out of it. And I'm not quite sure what to do about that as
Yeah.
we continue to surrender our privacy for good shopping experiences.
People are not aware of the decisions that need to be made. That is to say, they're not aware of the decisions that need to be made about privacy. And all of a sudden, we found out that we've lost a lot of it. But then there are other things that are happening, like returning to the moon and talking about putting cities on Mars. And I don't think the vast majority of citizens understand the implications of the space movement, if you will.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's a component of the population, don't you, Frank, that gets excited about it. That really does have the sense of adventure that is, I think, again, hardwired in the human experience. We are going to go out there and we are going to do these things because it's who we are. But, for someone, sitting somewhere and really struggling with this in many different ways, I think it's incumbent upon us in the industry to explain to them that you can't complete a 911 call, or you can't complete a convenient financial transaction. Your food is being grown successfully because of satellites. We're able to feed the people we feed on the planet because satellites now are having a tremendous influence on the efficient use of agriculture, for example. Healthcare, the same thing. I mean, telemedicine is going to save a lot of lives in places where you don't have major hospitals, where major hospitals have now pulled out in rural areas. So I think we in the industry need to, again, tell that story much better. If you don't learn from history, right? Was it Santayana who said you're destined to repeat it? So I go back to what I was saying earlier. The technologies are going to continue to flourish. We're really good at engineering stuff, but we're not necessarily good at looking at our hearts and saying, we've got to change. We really do have to change if we're going to adapt to this. The psychological impact of someone being in between Earth and Mars and looking at both of those things. We don't know what that psychological trauma is going to be like. I mean, we're looking at it in the industry, but these are the kinds of things that we may not be thinking about because the technology is sort of our focus, but these are the things that are going to complete the experience for us and either make it successful or, as you say, something that a lot gets us exploited again.
Well, a lot of people have asked me, well, is there going to be an overview effect when we go to Mars? And the answer is not exactly, because what I've been describing is seeing the planet Earth and recognizing it as a planet with oceans and continents and clouds. And that's still true on the moon. But once you're standing on the surface of Mars, you see the Earth as a point of light, and it's really going to be different. And there's even been research done on the Earth out of view phenomenon. What happens on that first spacecraft on its way to Mars, and then suddenly the Earth is not there anymore? What will that do?
What do you think is going to happen, Frank? What do you think the reaction is going to be if you take the human being today and put he or she in that situation?
I think the first people to go are going to be incredibly prepared for that. And I think they're going to really be thinking about it before it happens, because there's already talk about it. However, anyone who's ever sailed from, let's say, New York to Europe, and I have, there's a certain point when you can't see New York City anymore, and there's nothing but the ocean. And the times that's happened for me have been pretty striking, actually.
Yeah.
It is an emotional feeling.
Yeah, there really is no place like home. And we're going to have to deal. Dorothy was right.
Oh,
We're going to have to deal with that. We've got a treaty from 1967, the Outer Space Treaty, right, and four subsequent UN treaties, which fundamentally give us some ground rules about the peaceful use
yeah.
Of going out there. But again, are we going to default to our history, or are we going to find some way of changing? And I think that's got to be part of the conversation.
Let's step back a little bit and talk about something that's more quantitative, which is the financial and investment climate. So far, if you look at space tech as an industry, satellites are by far the most successful. Where do you see the opportunities for investment in the industry in the future in terms of satellites? What's going to be new and different? Because a lot's already been done.
Yeah, I think it's going to be that old boring word is, I think Governor Cuomo used to say that we need, more than oxygen itself, infrastructure.
Mm.
I know you had Dylan Taylor on, and he understands that. He talks a lot about how to investing in the infrastructure to get, to build that bridge to the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
To use a great phrase. I think Earth observation is going to continue to get a lot of funding. There's no question about that. I also am seeing more and more investment on the ground. Remember, this communication signal has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
It has, right? There are antennas and there are networks that carry this stuff to cities or to laboratories or to businesses. And again, the capabilities out in the sky in many cases exceed our ability on the ground to process it. You referred to data earlier. So we do need better systems to do that. And I think you'll continue to see investments there. New types of teleports, new types of gateways.
Yeah.
Again, it's not sexy stuff, but most of what you're going to see with regard to space and satellite technology is going to be fulfilling certain missions here on Earth to
Right.
help us live better. So and those things like most of our infrastructure needs some investment badly,
True. Well, as we're talking, something occurred to me that has been looming in the background for many, many years as a possible benefit to Earth that has now kind of surfaced again, and that is space-based solar power.
Mm-hmm.
Is the SSPI talking about that as another area that really might finally come into being?
We are actually, and we did a project with some young people about solar powered spacecraft for Mars. So with regard to the energy sources that are going to be required, I mean, solar power is going to play a significant role in propelling us out there, but also in power from space. It's really complicated stuff.
Yeah.
To get solar power from space now. We haven't really built the technology, but there are a lot of investors looking at it, actually.
One of the benefits that satellites bring, and you've emphasized them in this conversation, is it's all about improving life on Earth. That is really what satellites do, and that's what they've always done. And if they could have some impact on the energy situation, that could be a major development.
I think so, and it may just happen also down on the ground. I was struck when I heard that Texas has 30% of Texas's power generation now is
Right.
renewable energies, right? And
Oh,
so as you said earlier, a lot of this good stuff happens, but we don't see it until it's sort of part of our daily lives.
yeah.
We're focused on, oh, isn't life miserable? Oh gosh, are the Yankees ever going to win a World Series? All the horrible stuff in life, right? But meanwhile, human beings we're also doing what we do, and we may be stupid sometimes, but we're not suicidal, and we continue to build suitable places for ourselves whenever we can. So I think what's going to happen increasingly is as we create these complex energy grids where you're bringing all different kinds of renewables and traditional energies to the grid. Again, you'll be using a satellite at some point to manage some of this data
Yeah.
and to switch over efficiently and so forth. Satellite and fiber combined.
Yeah. I just have to say that since I live outside Boston, I don't care if the Yankees ever win
Oh,
another.
I said that for your benefit, Frank.
I do care about the Red Sox. If
They need an
they,
infield.
uh, so one other issue that's coming up a little bit and rumbling in the background is regulation, not just for the satellite industry, but for space tech in general. Any thoughts on regulation? Do you think it's needed? Do you think that regulators know enough to do it properly, or is that a concern you have at all?
Well, I mentioned the Outer Space Treaty. That was like a very early attempt to regulate, national behavior. Um, every lawyer I speak with who's in this industry, and I suspect lawyers would say something like this, but I also suspect that there's truth to it, says that the regulatory regimes that guide the industry have not yet caught up with the facts of the technology, right? So it seems like there's a recurring theme here, isn't there?
Right.
So they all tell me that now the sharing of space technology is regulated by export compliance laws, right? Those are largely national endeavors. With they prohibit the export of certain technologies to other countries without permission and so forth and so on. Environmental laws regulate the operations of spaceports, which our friend Steve Wolf is seeing more and more of. He runs the Global Spaceport Alliance. And there are a host of regulations that impact the operations of the industry regarding launch and so forth. But when it comes to regulating operations in space, there are gaps.
Mhm.
And many industry, government, and civil society folks are keen to fill it, but they're not quite sure how to regulate it. There's been some activity in the private sector. You've got companies like Privateer, Alex Fielding and Steve Wozniak are really trying to tackle this debris issue
Right.
with a private sector company. So you're seeing some private sector response. But overall, I don't think necessarily the regulatory regimes have caught up. For once in my life, I agree with the lawyers on that. Again, I suspect you'll see more and more of it as we go forward.
Yeah. If you could wave a magic wand and let's say President Biden gave you a magic wand and he said, you can tell me what would be the best policy I could enact regarding space and satellites and all of the things you're interested in, what would you tell the president?
Uh, I would say let's see if we can develop a policy that gives us an absolute guarantee for the peaceful use of outer space, and that on a practical level of the policy facilitates collaboration
Yeah.
among nations and peoples. So it would look something like Taiwan, where industry and government collaborate beautifully
Yeah.
with civil society, and you're properly balancing the interests of those sectors. I think that's certainly the ultimate objective.
Yeah.
But Frank, I know I sound like a broken record here, but there would also probably be in that package some sort of consideration for a restoration of privacy.
Mm.
Again, I don't think it's a secret that a lot of what's propelling this sort of fragmentation of democracy
Oh,
is the degree to which technology is just racing so far ahead of it
yeah.
that it's disrupting us and our political systems.
And
And you asked me earlier about the Intelligent Community Forum. One of the things that we're really looking at is whether democracy can get reinvented at the local level
right.
by being able to sort of take a look at itself and to re-engineer communities so that they actually work for people. 40, 50 million people in America taking some sort of psychiatric medication for their anxiety. That does not seem to me the kind of great society we want to put together.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming to the end of our hour here. Lou, I could talk all day, but what do you think? What do you think the satellite segment of the industry will look like in 5 to 10 years? What will be the big areas of development, do you think?
I'm not sure that there'll be, well, you'll certainly see explorations and landings on the moon and Mars again, all of the kinds of things that, the people in the overview effect were aspiring to and leading us to. I think a lot of the vision that you've laid out will come to fulfillment in that regard. But interestingly enough, I think it will be true that it will be part of our daily lives in ways that, like an umpire in baseball, to go back to our baseball analogy, we don't even consider unless they make a bad call. You don't realize the umpire's there, but he or she's regulating the game, right? And so I think whether they admit it or not, companies like Uber and others will continue to define themselves as space companies.
Yeah.
They will see that. And I just think we'll be pushing further out and we'll probably be a $5 trillion industry.
Yeah.
Earth observation will be doing more and more things to remediate climate change. I'm really, really positive about that.
I guess a good final question. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't, or any comment you want to make that we haven't touched on?
No, I think you've been thorough as always. We've covered it. Again, we think that satellites have made a better world and will continue to make one, but we want to make sure that it makes us more human and not less. And that's really what we're all about here.
Oh, that's great. Lou, thank you very much. This has been really inspiring and interesting.